Do you get scared easily? Are you a calm person or someone who gets angry quite easily? Do you get into fights? And what about your muscles? Are they strong and developed? Is your body as tough as your mind? Or are you rather weak and effeminate? Well, it all depends on the dignity of your Mars. Mars is one of the arch-malefic planets, one that can cause the most harm in one's chart next to Saturn. Now, because of that, his dignity is quite crucial in understanding someone's birth chart and what events will he perceive in his lifetime. How well will he handle certain situations, especially ones dealing with actual physical harm, competition, aggression, etc. Thankfully, the dignity of Mars is rather easy to analyze because while it does depend quite a bit on the house position, it is the sign position that can tell you how well you can handle such stressful situations and how will you react to actual danger. For example, let's say Mars is in a fiery sign. Well, that's one of the good positions for Mars on the one hand because Mars feels at home there. It is his own environment. But on the other hand, it does make someone quite temperamental, quite impulsive, and mostly aggressive. Now, this aggression will usually not be about just starting fights or getting into trouble. Usually, fiery Mars will be quite dignified, so it will be more about being more competitive than others, which is not a bad thing in and of itself. And if he is not afflicted by another malefic, can be quite beneficial if one talks about sports, for example. Quite the opposite is true about Mars in a water sign, because in water, fire gets extinguished on the one hand, but on the other, there's quite a bit of steam. So a person with Mars in a water sign will usually be somewhat passive-aggressive, can be quite aggressive in terms of just lashing out, especially if he feels threatened, and will act far more on his emotions than a person with Mars in other signs. A good example of Mars behaving rationally is Mars in an air sign. However, in an air sign, Mars can suffer from analysis paralysis or be too mindful of what it does. So in an air sign, one can expect Mars not to behave quite as well as in a fire sign, for example. The plus side is that an air sign Mars will usually show aggression only in speech, not in action. It's not the Mars that starts the bar brawls or the one that causes trouble to others. It's not the criminal, at least not usually. The only exception to this rule is if Mars is with Ketu, then it can show someone who is rather antisocial, because the air signs are the social signs of the zodiac. So in this case, yes, a person can be rather disruptive, can show antisocial behavior, but that would depend on the house. Now, the absolute best position one can have for Mars is Earth signs. In Earth signs, Mars is not only grounded and rational, he is also steadfast. He is willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goal on the one hand, and on the other hand, he won't be rushing headfirst into a wall. He will be much more calm and methodical. So what about Mars in different houses? Well, there the situation becomes quite different because the house position of Mars dictates not how well can you handle the energy of Mars, but rather where do you apply it. So for example, Mars in the first house usually shows someone who is very athletic, someone who is very physically capable, someone who is absolutely great at using his body to the maximum. Mars in the second house, on the other hand, that shows someone who is rather impulsive in speech and someone who is, how shall I put it? Well, he has a strained relationship with his family. Not his immediate family, rather relatives. At least that is usually the case. Also, when he was growing up, usually that person would have had quite an aggressive environment. Um, Imagine someone growing up in a ghetto. That's the idea here. However, when it comes to Mars in the 6th or the 10th houses, the other outer houses, now Mars becomes quite a bit more dignified, and he does extremely well in those houses in terms of having the energy and the drive to achieve a great career. Such a person can be a great doctor, lawyer, or someone who is an overachiever. The worst possible position for Mars in terms of houses is the Kama triangle, as in 3rd, 7th, and 11th houses. Now, in the 11th house, he can do quite well in terms of money, but not in terms of friends or how others perceive you. In terms of the 3rd and the 7th houses, then it's either a lot of fights with friends or a very strained relationship, a very aggressive relationship with partners and with spouses. Now, a brief mention about what is called Mongol dosh, because Mars in the 7th does indicate a rather violent end to a relationship, whether through the death of the spouse or through breakup due to divorce, etc. It's a malefic in the 7th, and it's the worst malefic one can place in the 7th. Saturn does well there, Mars doesn't. However, if both partners have Mars in the 7th, in that case, the firestorm that rages in the 7th house is rather balanced, and in that case it can actually work quite well in terms of the relationship itself. The second worst position, with some caveats, is Mars in the Moksha triangles, the 4th house, where it indicates quite a strained relationship with the immediate family and usually the mother. In fact, it can indicate a very aggressive mother or a very aggressive family, household. In the 8th house, it's not as bad, but one must be constantly aware of dangers around him because such a Mars can indicate accidents and, of course, physical harm, which must be constantly monitored. One should avoid putting oneself at risk. In the 12th house, there is a double-edged sword, one might say, because on the one hand, this Mars is very feeble in terms of actual physical strength. On the other hand, such a Mars can be extremely good if one changes his residence and moves to a different country. In fact, with Mars in a 12, moving to a different country is a very, very, very good idea. Also, another problem with Mars in a 12 is actually when it comes to sleep, the dreams can be rather disturbing, or there can be some issue in terms of actually getting asleep. On the medical side of things, Mars is one of the most interesting planets because it can show quite a few medical procedures, especially when it comes to surgeries, and as mentioned before, any form of trauma will be seen through Mars, as well as Ketu, of course. Now, Mars also indicates the actual strength of one's muscles. If Mars is with other malefics, it can show either a blood problem, because Mars also represents the blood, specifically the red blood cells, but usually it shows some issue with the muscle development. Now, when he is with benefics, one can be extremely muscular, one can be very athletic. That's a good thing. When it comes to Mars sitting with other malefics in a certain house, one can expect some issues relating to that house. But it all depends on which malefic is located there in terms of what the results will be. Also, even if there is a benefic influence, it will not completely negate the malefic influence of Mars with another malefic in a certain house. Rather, it will indicate a more benign outcome. For example, if Mars is with Saturn in the 10th house, it usually does indicate knee injury. However, if there is benefic influence, well, the person will heal. Or if either Mars or Saturn are in their own home, there is also a good likelihood of the person healing. One other thing that is worth mentioning is that Mars is also directly related to the sex drive. And if Mars is located with some other planet, it usually indicates a sexual desire related to that other planet. And when it comes to the sign it is placed in, it is a good indicator of the area one is most attracted to in the body, or the erogenous zone. However, this is quite a broad and complicated topic which should be left to its own video. Now, I think that covers everything that is most important about the dignity and strength of Mars and how it plays out. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you did, you are welcome to check out the other videos on my channel, and also check out my website. You'll find the link below. Thank you.